Hey everyone, doing a video about the hydraulic press, how to assemble it, how to use it safely, and hopefully a little bit about how to get good results. What you're going to get is your press frame. This is the main press frame, and your pump and any risers that you ordered along with it. This is a earlier version. This is the smaller one, but they both are the same as far as operation and setup. Same pump, same exact connections. So you've got your pump frame. This is your cylinder. This is where the hydraulic hose connects. This is your pump. There's some assembly to be done to prevent damage to some of the pieces during shipping. We are shipping with the feet for the pump and the press separately. So when you get your pump, it'll have a bag attached to it like this. Inside the bag are the little feet for the pump. And this is covering the coupler to prevent any oil leaking out. So you take off the bag, set it aside, take the pump, flip it over. There's 2 feet. One connects here, one connects at the back. You open the bag, and you'll find the 2 feet. This is the one that goes in the front. There's 2 holes. You just remove the Allens, put the front foot in place. Tighten up the bolts. And then the back one is a single bolt. For the back one, you're going to put it on hand tight. Just snug it with your hand. Flip the pump back over. Make sure it's sitting flat, and then tighten this, so that'll keep the pump level. Now, to connect the press, the hose has these storage caps. These storage caps prevent any oil from leaking out when it's disconnected. So we're just hand loosening the cap. Pull the cap out. There'll be some oil residue on it. Just be aware of that. The cylinder is the same way. You remove the storage cap. It's like that. You might get a couple of drops from oil. I always have a rag handy when I'm working with hydraulics because they tend to leak when you connect them. So to connect it, you just place the connector on. It's spring loaded, so you can push it on a little bit, and then you start the threads of the collar and you just start to turn it. It'll give you a little bit of resistance. What I found is that if you wiggle the connector or wiggle the hose from back here and keep wiggling it, it makes it easier to turn, and then it'll suddenly stop on you. Once it stops on you, just give it a little bit of hand snug. No need to use any tools, just hand tight, but just make sure it's snug. Usually I'll take a second to wipe off any oil residue and get ready to press. The feet for the pump are very simple. You'll need a 13 millimeter wrench, or a 1/2 inch is very close in size, should fit, might be a little bit tight. You can also bolt it to your bench if you like. You'd have to pre-drill your bench for it. You just place the feet on and then place the nut on the top and tighten down with the wrench. And then repeat it 4 times. There's another nut underneath. If you need a little bit of adjustment to level it, you can turn the nut on the inside to raise or lower each foot independently. But unless your bench is very, very wonky, you probably won't need to adjust them. If you feel you want your press to be more secure, you take off the feet and just bolt it directly to your bench is also good. So to operate the press, there is a knob on the side of the pump. You must have this knob closed to the right all the way to raise the pump. So you make sure that this knob is snug tight to the right. Place your work in the press, and then we're going to start to pump. The pressure gauge is here. The pressure gauge is filled with liquid. You'll notice there's a line across it. It's not cracked. This is filled with glycerin or mineral oil to help the gauge work properly. So don't worry, it's normal to have a little air bubble in it. You can move it around and you can see the bubble move, so don't worry, your gauge isn't cracked. A little bit about riser blocks. We offer riser blocks to fill the press volume. The larger press definitely needs quite a lot of risers to do most activities. So make sure you order riser blocks if you don't have any. Most people like to use aluminum because it's soft and it won't damage it. You can use mild steel, but we would highly recommend you use something soft like aluminum so it doesn't damage it. You want to fill up the press as much as possible and keep the stroke of the press cylinder as short as possible. The press is more stable and it can do stronger, better work if it's retracted to its least amount position. So you only want the press to move just as little as possible. So for a die, something small like this, you'd want it just 5, maybe 10 millimeters above your work, and that's all you need. So everything else should be filled with risers from the bottom to the top. If you use a pusher block, keep the pusher block as short as possible. Don't buy really long pusher blocks. Buy the short ones and then fill up from the riser from the bottom. The press will be more stable. A press like this is what I would guess we would call it a frame press. It's got this central spine. This is where all the strength for this press comes from. It's different than a 4-poster or a different design. Those designs have a tendency to flex when you apply a lot of pressure to these. This has got 80 millimeters of 12 millimeter steel on its side. It's very, very strong in this direction. So when you apply force from the bottom, it resists that force so that you get a nice, deep, clean impression. If you have a press that bows with pressure because it doesn't have this rigid support spine, you won't get a very good impression, and you'll need a lot more power to get the same work from this press. So when you set up the press, it's very important that you center your work along this central spine. You have about 12 millimeter central spine. You want to be as close to the center of that, and that's your silver. So if you notice, this silver is offset from the center of the die. We want to center the actual lump of silver and the die as close as possible, not the die. So don't put the die here. You put the die with the work centered as much as possible, and you can look from the side over here and try to get that lump of silver lined up with the center of the spine of the press. That's where you're going to get the best performance, and it's going to keep the die from popping out or bending the press or hurting you. So again, very, very important to center your work. When you're working with a press, you want to follow a procedure where you apply pressure slowly and deliberately, and you're watching for any motion and listening for any unusual sounds. After a while, you'll get to know what the press sounds like and feels like in operation. It shouldn't be making any snaps, cracks, pops, any sharp sounds. Immediately release the pressure and find out what's going on. It shouldn't make any weird noises. A little bit of creaking is normal, but it shouldn't make any sharp cracks or pops. It's also best practice to step outside the front of the press. So if this is the front of the press, if something's going to pop out, it's going to pop out in this direction or this direction. So if you stand to the side, you're out of the hopeful trajectory if something goes wrong. So try to remember to stand outside to the side of the press and not directly in front of it. It's natural for people to want to look right in front of it and watch the work. Try not to do that. So again, to activate the press, we're tight here. Looking at the pressure gauge, the work is set. We're all double checked. Take a look, make sure we're centered, and then we can start to pump. The pump is a little bit slow. It takes some work to get it to move, but you'll start to see it to move. Again, the pressure won't register until it meets resistance. So the pressure gauge is going to sit here at 0 until we actually hit the top platen. This doesn't take any effort. And now you start to feel a little bit of resistance. So now it's going to start to register and start to take some work. So we have to work harder to push this down now. And we'll start to see the pressure slowly rise. Now, there's really no need to exceed about 3,000 to 3,500 PSI, which is a little over 20 MPa on the gauge. So you're just going to pump to that 20 mark and release your pressure. You'll notice the platen come down, and then you can take a look at your work